Hello and welcome back to the WEBSTER Report. We took a week off last week. A lot of things going on for myself and also for Alex. You know, we may touch on some of those subjects this evening. But, you know, we start off as we always do, thinking that, you know, we might just be talking about the same things, but there's so much that's going on right now in this country and in every other country. We're looking at what Donald Trump is doing. You know, he's doing things for America. The Americans can't help but like what he's doing. A lot of executive orders signed. I'm sure Taylor will have something to say about those later. But he's now taking the sanctions off Syria. So we've had a governmental change over in Syria that had all these sanctions. Now the government's changed, the sanctions have been taken. The ones who are in charge of Syria are, well, they used to be called terrorists, but I think they're called freedom fighters or something like that now, Alex. I'm not sure they're called terrorists anymore now that they're in charge, but Trump has now relaxed that, which, with the Golan Heights, which Israel occupy, with Iran being friendly with Syria and Russia there and China there and Afghanistan there, are we seeing a gathering coming in the Middle East? I know you don't really, we were talking about earlier, that all your stuff is becoming more interpersonal for yourself now and telling truth and not worrying about what other people are thinking. It's basically just speaking the truth. People will either take it or they don't. And I think that's what we're all at. We've got to start speaking about the truth, even if people have got something against what we're saying. Well, come to the table and tell us why. Come and let's debate it, because we really do need to start having these conversations, because we can see how religion is heating up as well. You know, I've seen a lot of arguments online that there's Afghanistan. There's people in Afghanistan who are saying, Afghanistan Muslims now are now leaving Islam. So we're seeing a lot of changes. You know, you're still going to have the people fighting, oh no, it's this, it's that. But we're seeing a lot of changes. We're seeing a lot of lawlessness. We're seeing corruption just pouring out from every facet in society. Police, politics, banking, judiciary, prison service, all these corrupt people are all pouring out. And it's hard to not believe that these are all intricately linked, even though it doesn't look like they're linked in this world. But as we well know, Alex, we haven't got a battle of flesh and blood. This is now a spiritual battle. And as we've contested in the last couple of weeks, there's a lot of spiritual battles going on for me personally and for you personally. And I think for everybody that we know that is trying to walk this path. So, like I said, I know that we can only cover the smatterings of it, but what can you see? What do you feel that's coming out here now?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, I don't really take my cues anymore from what's going on in the world. It's just been a big change. But you're not an old fart like me. Well, you kind of are, but you're like about 4 years behind me. So you might not remember Rent-A-Ghost.
Of course, right? I remember Rent-A-Ghost.
I can't remember who remembers what. I remember it.
Well, Timothy Claypool.
Timothy Claypool's the one I want to talk about, right?
The trickster.
Remember, he dressed up in that yellow and red costume, right, with the baubles on. He was a jester, right? Now, the jester's like the trickster archetype, and that's what's interesting to me. And the thing about that that's interesting is it's a costume. You know, when Adam and Eve were naked and realized they were naked,
yeah,
God clothed them. He gave them clothing, garments, right? But garments not the same as a costume. So you know when you go into court and you deal with a judge, and he's there in fancy dress, isn't he? He has his long cloak on, his wig, and he has his gavel. And it's like fancy dress. He goes, order. And basically, it's like, you know, if it's contempt of court, what it really means is he's lost control, and he's just gonna impose naked power upon you. He's gonna steamroll you because
We're gonna bang his hammer, bang his shovel.
yeah. This can't happen, right? But it's that's the difference. It's costume. I was thinking earlier on, I saw an article earlier about Rupert Law and how he's fallen out with Nigel Farage, and he's talking about Farage having like this massive ego, and very interesting what he said, because when Rupert Law criticised Farage over something open, I think it was a Tommy Robinson thing, because obviously Farage, if he wants to become an established political party, can't be seen to be associated with Tommy Robinson. But those who perhaps are more critical, like Rupert Law, and really want to deal with the issues, they're not well suited to being part of a political party. So true truth tellers, like John the Baptist was an outsider. The prophets were often outsiders because they couldn't really be insiders. They couldn't really be conforming to the system. Most people on the inside wear a costume. That's not the same as garments or clothing. So, like, you need garments or clothing that's genuine to protect your innocence, because you're innocent. Whereas if you're not innocent and you've got an evil streak, or you're dodgy, or you're a trickster, you'll wear a costume. You'll play to the gallery, right? And for me, that's one of the major axes of what's going on in culture right now. If we get too bogged down with events, oh, this looks like this, oh, is Trump this, no, he's that, is he a hero, or is he an anti-hero? You can never answer these questions. They're all just actors on a stage. No matter how much they've got good in them, somebody's pulling their strings. Even if they're not consciously a deviant, they can still be being used because they've bought into an agenda. So we don't really know. This is why we need to be able to discern the heart of the matter. Really read people rather than just go, oh, such and such is a shill. You know, just because they've got some sort of power, it's like automatic, as we said before. Oh, well, if they've got any kind of platform, they're obviously a shill. Well, that means Joe Rogan's a shill then. It means that nothing that he says or does is valid. Everything's false. And if you think about, even in the Christian church, a lot of the time, it's like people are scared of their own shadow half the time, because if you do something that's slightly out of line, they've got a demon. You know, everything's very black and white. It's like people aren't able to just look at things objectively, sit with it, not make rash judgments. But instead they go, oh, it's this, it's that, because they've got these preconceived notions, and then they put these other people, these scenarios into these boxes, tell themselves a story and go, oh, I've got the answer now. And it's pretty shallow. And I think what we have to do is we have to train people, and we have to lead by example, to not make rash decisions about whatever world events, because these are big stakes. It's a high stakes game. There's a lot of clearly dodgy stuff going on, and a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And in order to discern it properly, I think sometimes you've got to keep your powder dry while keeping your eyes open. And all too often in the truth community, people are quick to voice their opinions, and we don't ask, well, what are they based on? Usually just biases.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor's just posted in the chat room about people are unreasonably pessimistic. I don't think that people are unreasonably pessimistic in the full essence of what that means. I think people can be pessimistic because of the reality of what things are. I mean, you know, I was very pessimistic 10 years ago because I discovered that, you know, things like working hard and paying bills is wrong. Banks lending money is wrong. Council tax isn't applicable. It's all wrong, but it's all normal. Everybody knows that this is normal. Well, that was what the worrying thing was. So it's quite pessimistic when everybody thinks it's normal to virtually do all the things that are wrong. It's seeing that world that's tipped upside down. Somebody posted in the chat room about court is summoning the dead. Well, all of this system only speaks to dead people. That is the complete opposite of what God's system is. It's as above, so below. So we can see this foreshadowing all throughout Old Testament going into New Testament. And yet, when you open that Bible, it's all there. Yet people, as we were talking about just before we come on air, people want to argue that Oh, it's written by Freemasons. It's been corrupted. It's been this. Well, do your due diligence and see what goes back to the earliest scriptures and find the best translations. If you can't do that, then you're just going to flirt about on what other people have told you. Well, I can't do that anymore, Alex. When I listen to what other people told me, my mum said, work hard, pay your bills. That's not the correct thing to do, yet it's been normal for all these years. I saw an interesting advertisement, I think it was 1981, and it was Dudley Moore in a Barclaycard advert.
Right.
And he was in a record shop, and he was going, yeah, I'll have that record there, yeah, and that. And I forgot me cash. Oh, it's all right, sir, we take Barclaycard. Barclaycard? What's that? And I think back and go, wow, it was only then it had started to bite in the 80s. And it was as we got through the 80s where there's blame, there's a claim coming. All through those bloody Yanks, Taylor, wasn't it? It's all come in. America sneezed, we caught the cold. And then we go on and we go into the Vaccination Damage Act. You know, that 1986 Act is what set us up for all this now. And, you know, the flu jab is, I think it was something like 29% efficacy. Well, if that's no good, what are the boosters doing? What are you boosting? If getting ill is still part of it and spreading it is still part of it, then what are you boosting? You know, and then you're looking at, well, hang on a minute, they put SV40s in these. SV40 is the virus that they were pouring into rats to make them have tumours, and you're injecting it into people. So you're giving people tumours now? And then you're putting DNA from other species and other people in this. So you're doing an absolute saturated attack. It's like carpet bombing your immune system. And then we wonder why we've got to this point. Well, it's because we've followed what people said. The government told us to do things, and we've just gone and done them. It's only 2 weeks ago my cousin says to me, I saw a thing what they were going to do. I said, you're going to have to be more specific than that. He said, contrails, they're going to spray contrails in the sky to dim the sun. I went, chemtrails. You went, chemtrails, that's it. I went, 20 years we've been talking about that, mate. Why do you only just see this now? It was on the BBC, mate. So it's on the BBC because everybody's pointing at it. I mean, I still know people who don't notice it and don't even bother looking up. But because it's being noticed now, everything's now being put on the TV. Everything's coming out. They're trying to distract us all again. Where's the Ukraine war gone? Why is that not all over the place again? What's going on, Alex?
Well, that's narrative.
It's like all this obfuscation that's going on, and yet we're still going out and we're still working hard and we're still doing this and we're still doing that. And, you know, FA Cup was won yesterday. Football's been on again today. It's like, oh, yeah, that's happening, but never mind. And when does that catch up? Because there's got to be a point where all this stuff comes together now, mate.
Well, the thing for me is it's all the problem with all of it now. Anything that happens in the world, it's all subsumed into narrative. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like, so people come on, and there's been some talk already about the surname, and it's like, yawn. And the thing is, right, so people talk about the word person, and you go, I'm not a person, I'm a living man. And it's just been taken too far. Like, for example, if you say someone's a living person, you've got to have a word that's a category for a human being. In other words, sometimes you say human being. Otherwise, you kind of go, oh, I can't say person now. Because if I say some person, some idiot's going to go, oh, he said the word person. Oh, we're not persons. It's like, oh, my goodness. I mean, it's just language. So just because dog Latin has led to a certain legally speak in its particular setting, it doesn't mean we can't use the word person anymore. But people become prescriptively legalistic about it, and then they build whole narratives around it and go, you can't say this, you can't say that. Oh, this is the key. Oh, this one thing that we say, everything pivots on this, and it just doesn't pivot on it at all. It's just language. It's just a word. And people get into overkill, go down rabbit holes, pin everything onto simple words, phrases, and constructions, and it's just frankly ridiculous. And it's a symptom of the fact that people are not living anymore. What they're doing, you know, you can call them keyboard warriors or whatever you want to call them, but they're living their life from behind the screen, and they've stopped living for whatever the reasons are, fear, whatever, trauma, doesn't really matter. We know the world's not getting any easier to live in, but what are you going to do in response? You just keep talking about how bad it is, or are you actually going to step up, step out, get in there, start influencing people, live your life? Because ultimately, you know, from a Christian point of view, from a point of view of a Christian disciple, you know, we are the starting point. We are the light of the world. His life is born afresh in us. We're the example. So he's come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. So ultimately, it's down to us and to set that example for other people and to challenge, you know, to call out rubbish. I think that's important, but to do it graciously, you know. So I think we're missing the prophetic voice in the world as well. We need to cut through rubbish, you know, stupid delusional voices. We need to cut through them like a knife through butter. And, you know, so that for me now is the mission. And that's why I'm going to be doing more and more. But, you know, hopefully not in a way. I mean, sometimes you've got to be a bit brutal when you're wielding a scalpel. But sometimes people need to bleed a little bit. But then you can hopefully administer a bit of first aid.
Well, I think when we're talking about the language, when we're going into the specifics of that language, in a court setting, yes, be careful with the language. Understand what interpretation we're standing under. That's the difficult part. We can theorise it. It's going into those courts and doing it. Now, there's a lot more people that are doing it, and I think they're starting to feel the pressure because of all this. But again, we've got to be able to have ordinary conversations like we're having and be able to use that language because, you know, it's like using the term Christian. It does need redefining because a Christian seems to be a lot of things, yet it seems to be also a very specific thing. And it was also a derogatory term that was actually labelled on people. You know, like, oh, the Christian type stuff. So we've got to be flexible and be open enough that people understand a language a certain way. You know, not everybody, when you say, oh, I turned up in person, not everybody's going to go, oh, you turned up as a corporation. Not everybody's going to be able to, you know, swap and change that. So we've got to understand, if we're talking about the legal stuff, then we can say, if you're in person, you will be there as a mister, you will be there as a corporation, if you're in that setting. But as I always said with David Robinson, if the man would be recognised going into that setting, and I've got my Monopoly piece, Mr. Webster, my little sports car, nobody else has a higher claim on that. So I should be able to use that in commerce whenever and wherever I want, just like when I go into a shop and buy a Mars bar. The factor is, when we're going into courts, they're expecting that we want their service. So if we don't turn up, they accept that we are having their service because we haven't turned up. So we turn up and we say we don't want their service. That's when they have to commit the fraud. They have to railroad because they need you to do that. It's how we do that. Standing in court saying I'm a man is just not good enough. I've no contract. It's just not good enough. I don't know if Rich will be in the chat room tonight, but he's making some inroads. He's put some claims on this week on some of the groups, and it's really interesting with what's been sent to him because a credit card company sent him a joint gyro. So he must be doing something right, Alex. He must be rattling some cages, and that is what that's what the point to this is. We need to start rattling those cages. We need to start understanding that dead entity, we're being asked to pay for the dead entity that's not us. You know, we can talk about the placenta, we can talk about all that, whatever, we can get into that. But that's too deep for so many people. We've got to start on the top of the surface. And, you know, I'll be doing a talk with Carl at Burnley, at the Hampton Inn in Burnley, on tomorrow night, where Carl's going to be telling them how he's doing things, where he's writing to them and he's using the lowercase, and they're responding in that way, and they're accepting what he's decided to pay. Now, is that just an interim because they don't know what to do with him yet and they've got plenty of other fish and they'll come back to him? Just like with many people, they could be doing that. We don't know. But he's playing the game, Alex. He's staying as that corporation. He's staying as paying bills. Whereas I'm the opposite, where I'm going to say, well, that's how you can get some breathing space, but you need to really understand how this stuff should be working. And I think there's a good balance there. And it's that balance in this world that we need to then try and balance up with, well, what is ruling this world? And we know that these so-called elites, these bloodlines, have got all these front men that we call Keir Starmer and all these people who are doing their bidding. What do they support? Where do they follow? Where do they hang their hat? It's certainly not on a cross unless it's upside down. So we've got to start having these conversations. It doesn't matter. I've got family who don't believe in anything, but they'll talk about demons. Oh, he's got demons. Well, how do you know? If you don't believe, how do you know he's got demons? The demons believe in God. So we've got to have this conversation because, like I said, Alex, after finding out all the truth about this world and how it's been hidden in plain sight, you open that Bible and you see that Bible goes against every religion. It contradicts every single religion. So it means if that's saying follow that word, it's going against what the Catholics say, what the Protestants say, what the Mormons, what the JWs say. And then you've got all these traditional things that have been thrown in and added into the mix. So you can follow Jesus, but you can have Easter and Christmas, and you can even take your kids out on Halloween. That's not what the Bible says. Using tarot cards to try and get closer to God, even if you say you're a Christian, the Bible says don't do that. Yet you can sit in a congregation and say you do things like that. And you say, well, it doesn't matter because the fundamental thing is, what do you believe? Do we all believe? What do we all believe in? Well, we all believe that Jesus is the only way. Well, that's a good start. But is there more to it? I was asked a question today, Alex, about pre-trib, because they've been debating it forever. Well, it seems very clear in Scripture when Jesus says, immediately after tribulation, you'll see the Son of Man coming. And then we'll be caught up. So that's like after tribulation, last day, last trumpet. Oh yeah, it's before everything starts. I don't know how we get to that unless it's tradition and you're reading it in. I had the same scriptures given to me, Thessalonians, and it all points to the last day. And I don't know how I could see it any differently. But the question was, does it matter? Does it matter that people believe that they'll be taken out of here before anything kicks off? Well, if it all kicks off and you're starting to see it kicking off and you think, well, I shouldn't be here, does that put your salvation in doubt? Are you going to just give up and say, I've been left behind? Or is he going to come back for me? Because if the pre-trib goes, then he's got to come back again. But that's not in Scripture. But they say, but after this section, church isn't mentioned. Oof. And it's like, well, you're reading a fair bit into it there. Let's read what's in the Bible and not what is not in the Bible. And if we're not going to be honest with that, or at least we can't have that conversation, because like I said, the guy I was speaking to today, he's more than willing to sit down and talk and debate it. And even if we can't ever get to the same understanding, he's not one of them who goes, well, I'm right, go away, you're wrong. Whereas I've seen people like that. This is what we teach, this is right, but I can't see this in Scripture. Well, it's this Scripture. Well, doesn't this Scripture mean that? Well, that's not what we teach. Well, I can't sit with people who say that's not what we teach when there's questions about it, Because if you've not got questions, you're not paying attention in this world, mate.
Well, I think I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I think all of this comes down to the same thing I was just talking about at the beginning. Is it a garment or is it a costume? And it's the same with people with doctrines. People say, well, they'll ask about the Trinity or whatever. And they'll ask these abstract questions. And people don't really know how to answer them. They've just got their own view on it. And of course, they believe it's connected with Scripture. But most interpretations that most people make are usually publicly quite superficial. People don't, like, they look at the costume and they mistake the costume for the garments. The garments are real worthy covering for a soul. We need garments to go out in life to be protected. Like, you don't walk about naked. You need suitable garments. And when you look at what goes on, if you look at like young lasses going out in skimpy dresses in their early 20s and, with the choke pout and you've got all the lips like puffed up and stuff with filler, that's a costume. So people are putting this act on like a Timothy Claypole costume. And the most important thing is not to adorn people in interpretations of doctrines. It's to sit present in your relationship with Jesus Christ and discern what's going on in the world, and don't be drawn in by surface level appearance. And to me, what are doctrines for? They're to edify. Doctrines can very quickly become sources of conflict and difference. And, to me, that's counterproductive. I'd rather have a person with no doctrines at all, but genuinely loving and having genuine peace in their heart, genuine discernment, living as Christ did, than somebody who had all the doctrines absolutely spot on, correct, 100 out of 100 on the exam, and was clinical and maybe even heartless. It's, to me, the truth is somewhere in the middle, and we've got to discern properly. And this is one of the reasons why I've pulled out the world as is, and I don't watch the news as is, and I don't care what's going on in the world at all. Not even slightly. I find it tedious. Everything, really, even end time stuff, I just find it really, really boring. And a few months ago, I didn't. Even maybe about like 2 or 3 months ago, I was quite animated by it all. And now for me, it just isn't the point. And I don't think that means I've abdicated responsibility. I think it means I've changed my focus now to what I want to do. I really want to be able, like, for example, the other day, I'd not seen my friend Roger for a while. And he's the guy who came on the show. He talks about international relations. He's very, very knowledgeable. And I've been moving away from academia. I'm writing this book now to tie up all the loose ends in my academic writing so I can stop me writing, basically. Because it's the old life. I want to dispense with it. And so people who've been more academic in my life, I've had a great reversion to spending time around them, because I know that there's a risk it'll bring out that old me. I don't want to be that person anymore. So I think the point comes for everyone where they decide, do I want to reinvent myself? Am I happy with the way I've been in my life? So not everyone's at that crossroads at all times, but with what's going on in the world now, I think it's a good time to really reflect on the way you do want to live in the world. And for me, it's all about, when I actually did meet him, it'd probably been a few weeks, but it was great when we did meet. It proved that sometimes less is more. Like if I met every week or twice a week, you might just repeat yourself, but quite a lot had happened. And he said, I've missed you. It's good to see you. And I don't think that he didn't, enjoy seeing me when I saw him more often. But suddenly, less frequency, more going on, really enjoy the catch up. And it felt like a deeper connection beneath just the superficial conversation about the state of the world. And it's like, right, yeah, there's something deeper going on. The world's a veneer. There's a costume. It's a simulation. And everything that we're doing is playing within that simulation unless we step out of simulation and become present again in a different way. Most people, it's like Pied Piper, and they're just following the Piper's tune. And to me, we need to be setting the agenda, you know, not sort of bending to their agenda. So for me, that's the heart of the matter.
Well, I can't disagree with you. Like I said, you've seen my evolution through things where I couldn't ever stop talking about how corrupt the utilities were, how corrupt the courts were, and all that. I've fought and fought and fought in it. I've stood there toe to toe with barristers, QCs, judges, and the police in those circumstances, and you just see, well, none of that really mattered. It didn't mean, well, let's not talk about it. But for me to put all my concentration into that, and I think trauma has a lot to do with it. You know, we were talking about that washing machine. It's very hard. It's very hard to stop that, open the washer and unload it, because you still think, well, they're not quite rinsed yet, or they're not quite clean. No, I need to keep going. But there was no life in it. It was all death. Everything was dead.
Yeah.
I needed to find that spiritual life. You know, I'm going to become a grandfather this week.
Congratulations.
I shouldn't be. Thank you, but I shouldn't be worrying about the world. But I have to worry about my grandson coming into this world, and I have to know, well, how do I protect him? I start spiritually straight away. You know, my family aren't believers. They don't, because they were brought up like I was. They are still blinded to this world. You know, and when we read the scriptures, it says people will not see unless they're drawn. Well, we have to shout. We have to blow those trumpets. Or maybe not in your case, Alex, but for me, I know I have to blow the trumpet. I know I have to join this somehow without going in. Yeah, without jumping into the constant joint gyro credits and the bills of exchange and stuff. But we need to be able to touch on these two, because
we do.
The evil tools that are being used in this court system with these judges that are unjust, it's the unraveling of Vanity Fair. You know, it's people are realizing that not everything we want is here. You know, I missed last Sunday. I went to a church service this Sunday that I should have gone last Sunday. And I didn't go last Sunday because I met up with two lads I used to play football with 30 years ago. And one lad, 62 years of age, he started to see within the last 10 years the corruption, the chemtrails, all this stuff. And he was called an idiot. He was called a nutter. His mates, he lost family, all because he was trying to point out the truth. Now he's 62 and he's even started to say, there's got to be more to life than this. And the mate that he was with, he's gone through trials and tribulations in his life. And just from talking and chatting, they were both looking for something else. And, you know, they've both been brought up like Church of England, but neither religious and neither had read the Bible. They knew bits of the Bible like I did. But until you actually read it yourself and say, I'm going to read this to study it, that's when it starts to speak and it changes you. I can't make people believe that. I just can only say what happened to me. And I know how much it changed. I know how many questions I've got and how people just teach that parroting of tradition of the Bible, that parroting of tradition of paying bills. And you just think everything is a parrot and everything is a tradition. Where's the thinkers? Most people don't care until they get to a position where they can't perform anymore. They're putting that costume on that they've been told to wear, Alex. You're Mr. Alex Brocklehurst, put your costume on, mate. You know, it's not your garment, because you're wearing your garment. As soon as you come into this world, you've got your garment on. It's just, we are targeted. You know, you'll probably know what chapter and verse it is, but where the dragon is waiting for the baby to come out, because I'm having you. I'm
Revelation 12.
world. Eh?
Revelation 12.
So that's what's happened from being born, smack on my ass, take my first breath. This is what life is. This is what you must do. And it's only because I went, well, why? It's because you have to. Why? Because that's life. What do you mean that's life? Why is life like that? Why do I have to get a job? Why do I have to get married? Why? And that, me and my ex-wife were talking about it. It was tradition to get married when we got married. It was still tradition. Even though sex before marriage, my parents wouldn't have been happy with it. My mum wasn't happy with it, but she thought, well, times had changed from her time. But now I can see that corruption. As I said, 1981, Barclaycard. What's that? Everybody knows what a credit card is now. But back then it was American Express and Barclaycard. I remember seeing an American Express advert saying, Mum, why don't you just get that card? You can save your money then. You don't have to spend your cash, just use that card. You pull up at an ATM and said, it says free cash, Mum. That doesn't mean what it means, Paul. Well, hang on a minute. You keep telling me life is this and that and that. That says free cash, but it's not free cash. It's having these questions and being able to sit down and ask them and have a conversation. We should all be able to sit around the table and have a conversation and not stamp our feet and have a paddy and a hissy fit because we disagree with each other. We're beyond that. Everybody who doesn't read the Bible and isn't born again is going to disagree with each other because they've all got their own inputs. I never had anything, Alex. I came with no doctrine. I came with no dogma, apart from my mum saying, oh, David and Goliath, it's just a story, as far as we know. We can't prove anything. We don't know this. Well, now I'm seeing archaeology. Now I'm seeing a lot more to this because that's where my focus went, Alex. My focus went to the spirit of this world and what is happening in this world. And if there's a battle going on, it must play out down here. And it's the same essence if you want to talk about ordering from the universe. Ordering from the universe is manifesting it into this world. But whether you should get what you're getting is a different kettle of fish. I've got to that point, Alex, where I've interfered in my life enough. I had everything. At the age of 20, I couldn't have asked for anything more. House bought and paid for, perfect wife, child on the way at 22. I had everything, but it wasn't enough. Sound like Eve, don't I, in the garden? Look at that, we've got everything there, but it's not enough, is it? We've got to be able to look back on our lives with humility and say, I don't know everything. So let's have a chat. Let's have a chat about something. Let's start a conversation. We started the show off by saying we've got to be able to start conversations. We had that start the show back in August last year when we started up. We needed to get this conversation going. Yes, bills are going up. Yes, this is happening. Council tax. All this is happening, but we need to know that this isn't all it is. But that is the means to their ends. And, we've gone from physical enslavement to volunteering, voluntary servitude, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think the church, another big problem that we've got is the church sold out a long time ago. I've been tracing a lot of the mechanisms by which it got deceived in institutionalism and power plays and politics. And it is a really big problem. I mean, you drive around so often now, you see so many churches with Ukraine flags outside of them. Straight away, it's like, yeah, don't go there. Like with the masks and all the churches that embrace the COVID policy, straight away, apostate. And, you can just see, and it's interesting, the whole thing with Good Friday and Easter Sunday. I think the serpent mocks. I think he's having a laugh up his sleeve, because if we're correct, and I believe we are, based on what I think it's Matthew 19, isn't it, where he talks about 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. And if you look at the timelines, it's almost certain that Jesus was crucified on a Thursday. And it's really interesting that the whole institutional church celebrates Good Friday, which for me means, some people say, well, again, the same question you asked, does it matter? But and at one time I would have said, well, it doesn't really matter that much because there's a symbolism. But now I actually believe it really does matter. But why do I believe it matters? Not because which day it is matters, but because if the church has been led astray to turn it to Friday for institutional reasons ages back when it was Thursday, and it just got tied in knots, it means every season that should have been aligned with Passover, because Jesus was the paschal lamb, every time it's not at that weekend, which it was last time, we're celebrating a pagan fertility, death and resurrection God.
Like last year, Easter was 3 weeks before Passover.
And not even on the right day. Not
No.
even on the right day. So
No.
the so-called celebration is on the wrong day, on a Friday instead of a Thursday. All the old days are giving the children chocolate eggs in church on a Sunday and socializing those children to believe that the holy sacrifice of God incarnate's blood to save the world is all about children coveting chocolate eggs at Easter because they like chocolate.
Well,
And if people don't think that's the problem, then that's what the problem is.
I think that's I personally think that is an issue. If you're putting Christ on a cross on Good Friday and Passover's 3 weeks away, and you're exchanging fertility stuff, and I get sick of people trying to come up with an argument that Easter isn't pagan. If we want to define pagan, what about the idolatry that's going on in that? Is paganism idolatry? Yes. Let's just call it idolatry then. But you're mixing the house. You're putting Christ in a house with Ishtar. Is that lukewarm? Because they believe in Jesus. They believe Jesus is the only way, Alex. That's why I'm saying, when I get asked the question, does it really matter? Well, it would to me. It would to me. You saw how much I had to go through to understand what the Sabbath meant. It doesn't matter about the Sabbath. Well, it does, because Jesus says, keep my Sabbath holy. Whatever that means, it doesn't say what to do on that. It's certainly not the laws of Moses, what we need to do. That's done. But the commandments are still there, and people seem to conflate them. So it makes it important to me, because I don't want to be that lukewarm Christian. People I know personally believe Jesus is the only way. They believe he's the Son of God, but they don't practice it. And
I don't think it's about the specific day, even though the issue revolves around the day. The problem isn't the day. It's the fact that the church can't discern, because it's got swallowed up in culture, that it's been led astray by a trickster, right? So the problem is not what day it is, but that it's not glorifying God. And more to the point, if the trickster serpent beast has dressed up in a costume, deceived the whole church and led it astray, he's mocking God to his face. He's enshrined mockery into the practice of Christians. That's the affront. That's the problem. Not that it's symbolically, it doesn't matter. All days are alike. That's what the New Testament message is. It doesn't matter. One person acknowledges this feast, another acknowledges it's not a point. It's the fact that a lot of the traditional structures that were in place, that were inherited from Judaism, got subverted, and particularly under Constantine. I mean, what was very interesting, I'm writing this book, and today, well, I think it was today, or maybe it was yesterday, I lose track of time. But at the beginning of Mark's gospel, there is a demon that manifests in the synagogue. Now, that's very significant theologically, because the synagogue outside of the temple, there was a time came after, in the earlier Jewish dispersion around the first temple, when they were exiled. So they had to set up synagogues, which was basically local areas of worship. And that became a bit risky, because if you develop local cultural practices that were perversions, the one good thing about temple worship being centralized, you'd only go once a year for Yom Kippur up to Jerusalem and make the pilgrimage. But it was more controlled in the sense that you couldn't have many deviations. When you have lots of synagogues, you have as many local practices and customs that could corrupt it as there were local customs and synagogues. So this whole thing where in the synagogue, Jesus comes into this religious center where God's presence should be. And in the place where God's presence should be, a demon kind of says, what have we got to do with you? Or what have you got to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? So it's not just an event, it's very symbolic that he's booting a demon out of the so-called prescribed place of worship. Now, and he tells the demon to be quiet. He won't let it speak, and it's because it's totally surrendered its will. It's damned. Therefore, when you have no free will left, you've surrendered your free will. Therefore, God won't let it speak, because it'd be unholy to allow it to speak. It'd be unholy. It would be profaning everything of God's creation, so it mustn't be allowed to speak. But when you've got free will, there was a leper he saw not long afterwards. And he healed him. And he said, right, don't speak about it. He didn't silence him. He didn't muzzle him like the demon and command him not to speak. He said, don't speak. Go and show yourself to the priests as an offering that Moses commanded. And why did he do that? Because it's not about proclaiming a message. It's not about revealing doctrinal truths. It's about showing that the fulfillment of the law has arrived, right? And showing the priests, so the priests will not be able to react to your claims. They'll just see and they'll ask, wow. Now, interestingly, early in the life of the church, the early Christians were just Messianic Jews who believed that Jesus was Messiah. And there were Messianic Jews who didn't believe Jesus was Messiah. And after the fall of the Second Temple in AD 70, what happened where the Pharisees became concerned that Jewish religion was becoming watered down because all kinds of messiahs were showing up, and it was eroding national identity because of the destruction of the temple. They were really worried that they were going to lose national identity, so they developed something which is a curse on heretics called the Birkat Harmonim. So the early Christians who were still going to the synagogues, basically, they had to pronounce a curse on Jesus to continue to attend the synagogue. When they couldn't do it, they outed themselves because, you know, they couldn't pronounce his curse. Now, interestingly, that's an inversion of Mark 1. Because in Mark 1, Jesus expelled a demon out of the synagogue. In the Birkat Harmonim, the synagogue expelled the Christians out of Judaism. And Judaism was holding them back. So actually, this was a starting point for Christianity becoming a separate world religion to Judaism. But it's a second bracket that echoes this demon being booted out of the synagogue in Mark's gospel, which showed the uncleanness of the synagogue. Now the uncleanness of the synagogue is booting Christians. I say, nope, it expels Christians. So the Christians are being liberated. But then under Constantine, what happens? The thing that wasn't successfully done by force, because the Jews had privileges, right? They didn't have to worship the emperor, because the emperor basically set himself up as God to unify the empire politically. And the Jews got special dispensation to worship on behalf of the emperor rather than actually worship the emperor because they were Jews. So the Christians originally had the same cover. When they were a separate group and they were just Messianic Jews, they had the same protections as the Jews. So what happened after the Birkat Harmonim and Christianity became separated from recognized Judaism, then the Christians were told that they had to worship the emperor, which they couldn't do. This is why they started being thrown to the lions and so on and so forth. So persecution came. Of course, the Jews didn't get persecuted. And Jesus said to his disciples, take up your cross daily and follow me. You will be persecuted. Sure enough, they start to be persecuted. Why? Because the demonic synagogue, basically where the demon was at home, has now booted the Christians out, which has effectively liberated them. So force did not destroy the Christians. Persecution galvanized them and expanded the movement. When it comes to Constantine, what does he do? He thinks, well, I'll unify the empire again. And what I'll do, I'll take the pressure off these Christians and we'll put all this wealth and this money behind Christianity. So instead of persecution now, he's welcoming, oh yeah, come back into the fold, into the power structure from the Roman Empire, the imperial power structure, the hierarchy. Then we'll have a man at the top of it. And then the serpent, the costume wearing can whisper in the ear and say, let's set up all these, oh yeah, let's put this over the pagan festival. let's put that over Christmas and Easter as if that's going to obliterate paganism. But in the long run, it just seeded paganism back into Christianity, which then started to. So you see, a crafty, subtle method through institutional Christianity and wealth. That was exactly the temptation that Satan gave to Jesus. He said, "See all these kingdoms. I'll give you these if you bow down and worship me." So as soon as it became an institutional church again, persecution didn't destroy the church. Christians were following it, taking up the cross, and were booted out of the synagogue. But then they welcomed back into an institution through Constantine, and then the corruption kicks in again. So you can see the tricks they're working, and that's why we have to take up the cross, and that's why Christians will always be persecuted, and that's why all the other religions never are, because they've got this big hole in the middle like a donut. There's no Jesus, there's no crucifixion, there's no problem for human evil in the human heart. It's the space aliens are going to come rescue us at the end of time. The space aliens are going to come in. The Galactic Federation are going to see that the humans are struggling. They're going to come in. You don't have to be righteous. You just have to be a decent person who didn't chop down dandelions.
Yeah, have a good heart. God knows my heart. God knows my heart.
Exactly. So that's the reality. Jesus at the center, the crucified Jesus who we have to follow, gets persecuted and killed. And Christians will get persecuted and killed. If they're in the spirit of Jesus Christ, they'll be persecuted. Because obviously Satan is the persecutor. Like he put him on the cross, he will do everything to destroy Christians, and he will do everything to promote other religions which basically don't have the central remedy that God provided to solve the problem of a fallen world.
Well, I think that's where, again, Jimmy posted earlier, when you were talking about Constantine, Jimmy posted Christianity is half pagan. That's why Christianity has to be redefined, because Catholicism is not Christianity. So for me, Christianity would be following what Jesus said, and Jesus's red letters, those words in the Bible, not what Catholicism says, not what Protestantism says, not Church of England, not Mormonism, not JWs. They all say they believe in Jesus. 700 religions say we believe in Jesus. Are they all Christian? Because that is not Christianity. So we have to redefine it. Either Christianity is what Jesus says and did and taught, and it's in the Bible, or we're going to say Catholicism is Christianity. That means I'm not a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus. That's where this comes in. When people just throw out, oh, Christian is half pagan, it's not Christianity. Catholicism is not Christianity. As me director posted, Vatican worships the sun god. They worship Lucifer. They've got a tomb of Lucifer. They've got a catacombs full of dead, and they've built on top of it. They've built all these big monuments and all these gods on top of all this death. That's not Christianity. Going over with the sword in the Crusades and killing people, spreading Catholicism is not Christianity. So we've got to stop thinking of these traditions that people have been taught, because they set us off on the wrong route. And if the hierarchies of these religions, if the elders have got it wrong, everything's wrong.
Yeah, that's the point.
We've got to start back with the Word of God, and the best version I can understand. I don't speak Hebrew, Alex. I don't speak Greek. But with a lexicon, I can see the English to the Greek to the Hebrew, and I can see what the best version is for me. I love the Old World English. I can understand the Old World English. And I can also use a lexicon and a dictionary to see what are the words like fear God. Oh, I don't want a God that I'm in fear of. Fear means honour. So if I went out and did something naughty and I knew my mum could find out, I'd be in fear of my mum. Am I scared of my mum? No. So we've got to grow up. You know, we were talking about still being on milk. We've got to start on the meat now. This milk stuff of, you know, banging pots and pans for the NHS and then going to church on a Sunday, sitting with a bloke in a box and saying, oh, I've done this, this, this and this. Oh, well, you've absolved these sins, go and say 5 Hail Marys and you're fine. All right, and then I'll go back and do what I did again and then come back the next week. It doesn't work like that. It completely doesn't work like that, because the only truth I found was in the Bible, and the Bible says that's not right. That's not true. And it also says to me that that's not Christianity. So you've got Freemasons who claim to be Christians. The third degree is a pledge to follow the Luciferian path. So you're following the path of Lucifer, which was an earthly king. He's not Satan. So you're following the path of a Nephilim, a half man, half god, earthly king, and you're pledging that. That goes back through the Keys of Solomon, through to the Kabbalah. This is all Jewish mysticism that is being taught through religion, and that's why we can have pagans and Christianity mixed up. And that's why now even Trump is saying we just need all the religions to come together. That's what is going, that's what the Bible says will happen, and it's happening. So, for this corrupt Bible that's written by the Freemasons, they're just writing what's happening, are they? They're just predicting everything that's happening. Yet there's a remedy in that. That was it for me, Alex. It's completely different. Paganism, and if it's Christianity, if we're going to call Christianity following what Jesus taught, Christianity and paganism don't mix. So if you are mixing them, that's important to me, and I can't do that. And it's like when I say, well, what about the Feast of Tabernacles and Pentecost and what we were talking about, Passover? Oh, they're Jewish. No, it's not. You've got people who say, well, I'm only New Testament. You can't just be New Testament, because you're missing the whole point to why Jesus did what he did. And it comes back, well, I know Jesus is the only way. Oh, okay, that's a good start. But is that it? Does it matter that you don't know what the Old Testament was all about? The promise to Abraham, the ram being substituted for Isaac, and all the blood sacrifices. And then the blood sacrifices stopping after he was on that cross. If you don't know why all that happened, does it matter? Well, it matters to me, mate.
Well, yeah. And so it should. But it's difficult when the church is institutionally sold out. The question is, where do you get your nourishment? It's not part of the design. I mean, things like the Eucharist, communion, it's more than just a stupid, empty ritual. It's supposed to be a way in which we kind of bring the reality and presence of Jesus back into our shared memory, so that we recognize and celebrate that he's in the midst of his people. And it's very, very important. So if you can't do that, you're losing out. And if you're like an individual out on the fringes, there's only so much you can do. Like obviously we met originally at BFA, Bolton Freedom Advocates, in 2013, 2014. You hadn't been saved at that point. And then under the police service in 2020, you'd had your conversion experience, and that was the start of a journey that gradually got back to Christianity Central again over truth movement. It's still in there, but it got flipped again the right way up.
Yeah.
But when you look at that, that's providential. Now that's a dynamic between two people who are doing a podcast now, whose journey started to overlap in 2013, 2014. And here we are 11, 12 years later doing this. So God takes his time, and he might not give you many people around you. I mean, Elijah at one point, God used Elijah to call down this drought for 3.5 years in the face of the prophets of Baal and everything else. And in the end, this drought that had been called down by the prophet started to affect the prophet, because there was a lack of water and a lack of food. And then obviously he had to be fed by the ravens at the brook Cherith. So it was quite a lonely, devastating existence. Being a prophet, he proclaimed the word that had consequences and repercussions for himself in terms of this drought. So being faithful is often a very lonely journey where you're out on the fringes. You're calling as a voice in the wilderness. It's a shame, because we should be able to have more solidarity, but the church is... it's not surprising, is it, that the church would be an object of attack? Because how is Jesus discredited in the eyes of the world? He wants to reach the world because he loves the world and wants everyone to be saved. Isn't willing really that any should perish. So the church is supposed to be the focal point through which the light of Jesus Christ is demonstrated. But instead, the church has become a sad trace echo of what it was supposed to be, a set of external rituals, a set of bricks and mortar, a mausoleum almost, celebrating death rather than life. So when people who should have been able to look to the church to see Jesus Christ look to a church and just see traditions of men, then they're going to start saying, well, the Bible's all made up, isn't it? Because the representatives of this Jesus are in a sterile, dead, lukewarm state, in institutional patterns, arguing over this, that, and the other, and look no different to other religions or other philosophies. So it doesn't stand out. It's not a city set on a hill that cannot be hidden. It's quite the opposite, and that discredits Jesus. So it's a really big problem, because to find somewhere where you can have things like the Eucharist, real fellowship, real connection, have a real community of people who are sincere and could really hope to change the world, you know, if they came together, it's very, very difficult. We tend to be solitary pilgrims, and we're quite fortunate when we meet other pilgrims on the way, because institutional religion is never going to be for us.
Well, when you look at the Eucharist as in the breaking of bread and the bread being his body and the wine being his blood, when you put that into a Catholic Mass, the Mass is designed to put Christ on that cross every Mass. I don't want to be crucifying Jesus ever again. He's done it. There's no need for that. You've got a symbol as a cross, but you put a man on it, you put Jesus on that, then you're just celebrating the crucifixion. It might only be subtle, but that means something to me. And if it means something to me, I don't want party to that. So I want to see what the life is. So when you say breaking the bread and having the wine, when you're having that, you are remembering what he did. His body was broken. This is why you remember it. This was being taught to people who didn't have that discernment in their hearts. We are all fortunate. How many times do we see it in the chat room that God is within us, the Holy Spirit's within us? It wasn't always like that. It's only from the cross that we've got that law written here. And now we've got true free will to do with what we want with that. And if we think that, oh, we're good people and we're not following what Jesus said, then I think you're dipping your toe in a bit of warm water. And I just think it's not about religion. There's no religion that can get you to God. Not one religion. It's the Spirit that takes you to God, but you've got to knock on that door. What door is that? It's Jesus. It's the one and only way. I'm the way, the truth, the life. Nobody gets there without me. Every religion says Jesus was a good bloke, Alex. He had something to offer. He was a prophet. He was a good man. He didn't do this. Everybody likes him from all the religions. They don't all say he's a son of God. None of them will agree on that. But he's a thoroughly bloody good, nice bloke. But Jesus stands there on his own and says, all them religions are no good. They're anathema. I'm the only way. That should prick some conscience. It didn't with me. I understood it. He stood out by saying that. But how do you believe, Alex? How do you just believe? You know, I believed in Father Christmas once upon a time, and then you realise that when you found your presents, your mum and dad are buying them for you and lying to you. So you just suss these things out. You discern things. Well, I'd never had that discernment, and I went to that Bible and I went, how do you believe? And it was just shown to me that all these liars, all this deceit, all this evil, and the people who are committing it believe in something. So what do they believe in? They believe in the secret societies. What the secret societies believe in? These bloodlines have propagated all this craft. You know, you've got to do this. You know, you get to third degree. I was talking to somebody last week about third degree. Oh, how do you get higher? Well, we don't always go higher. Because you can go to the right and you can go to the left. So it shows you that the structure is about you paying into this system and offering energy through all these rituals and the mock rituals, but the energy's still there. It's the same energy. You know, if you play a song on a xylophone and then play it on the guitar's going to have a bit more meat and a bit more vibration. It might shake you a bit more, but it's still the same tune. You know, it's still the Pied Piper. You know, you're still following that same tune, but you're saying, "No, I'm going that way," but you're dancing that way, and you're still saying, "Well, I still believe in that, though." Well, what does God say about that? You can't believe in that and that. You can't serve two masters. You're going to love the one and hate the other. So which is it to be? I didn't have one master because I thought that was life. This is just life. I didn't think I was bowing down to anything evil by doing what I was doing. I just thought it was normal life. You know, we're taught that, yeah, this is this society. This is what we expect. This is what we accept. And then you think, you know, that society evolves and different things come out. And you think, well, we've just got to progress and change. But then you realise that these are being influenced. And then when you actually step back and you can see the conductor, you know, we pulled the curtain back. We can see the man behind the curtain, Alex, playing up with all this stuff.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's those men who've got the free will who are following that evil that is projecting it onto us. And we're just blindly following along like lemmings waiting to just go straight off the cliff's edge. It's when you stop, and that's when everybody starts bumping into you, saying, "No, you've got to go this way, do this, do this." And that's when you're mocked. That's when you're called names. That's when you're spat on. That's when you're beaten because you stood there saying, "Oh, hang on a minute, I think we might fall off that cliff." Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
There's only one high priest of this world. That's it. The high priest is Jesus Christ. He sits at the right hand where all authority is for heaven and earth. He reigns now. He's not going to come back and reign for 1,000 years. He reigns now. And that is the only truth I've found. If you can't be humble enough to say, "Hey, hang on a minute, I might have got some dodgy information during my life," then I don't know what to say because I've always been able to go, "Well, I don't know everything." It's just that when everybody knows that you work hard and pay your bills, Alex, it's hard to argue against it when you've got nothing to, you know, contrast it with. But when you actually look at the Bills of Exchange Act and you think, "Bugger, I shouldn't have been paying these bills all this time," but my mum said, my mum ran businesses. My mum was a good debtor, mate. She was a good debtor. She ran good businesses. You know what I mean? She made profits. She paid bills. She paid tax. So
well,
she
that's
did.
it, mate.
Good debtor.
We've
We
all
never
been
get taught
deceived.
to be good creditors.
We've all been deceived, and the thing about deception is, if it's successful, you don't see it. You could ask why it happens. It's subtle and it's crafty over time. You've got to be able to see the signatures deeper, like I was saying about Mark 1, the synagogue, a demon in the synagogue. Jesus silences it. It's fully enslaved because it's giving its soul over completely. But the leper, he just admonishes him, "Don't speak," but he doesn't forbid him. And then he goes and speaks. He shouts his mouth off, and it affects Jesus' ministry. He can't actually preach in those areas anymore because all the crowds are coming out to him because he was gobby and turned it into a spectacle. He turned it into a costume show, a drama. Oh, brilliant. Well, Satan loved that. Brilliant. Roll up, Vanity Fair. It's the same thing, right? And so then on those terms, he subverts it. But then God turns it for good and he goes to other places and whatever. It's a constant battle. And then obviously with the Birkat Harmony, the Christians are expelled from that synagogue because they needed to be separated, to be free, to be liberated from those institutional structures. And what was it? It was a creed. I confess. It was creedalism. It was associating faith with stating beliefs as cognitive propositions about God, facts about God. I believe these facts about God. I believe these facts about God. Saying in church-based setting, and that's where all corruption kicks in. It doesn't mean there's no place for liturgy. It means if a church is purely liturgical in a procedural sense, you've lost something. So it's got to be a living reality, a living relationship with God through Jesus Christ. So after that, of course, persecution came for the Christians, and then Constantine, crafty. Here, have some money. Here, have some status. Here, come out of the persecution. Here, welcome, be accepted now. Become official now. Become part of the official narrative now. Christianity has become mainstream. Brilliant. You don't have to be on the fringes anymore. Oh, it's normal now. Everyone's Christian. It's a Christian country. What does that mean? Oh, don't worry about that. You're
Exactly.
Christian Church of England. You had your first communion at such and such a time. You've made it. It's a Christian country. You don't have to do anything. There's no obligation on you. You don't have to change your life, change your mind, change the way you live, seek a relationship with God you make. You don't have to do any of that stupid religious stuff. You just have to accept that you're born into a lineage, which is exactly what the Jews said. That's why John the Baptist said, do not presume to say to yourselves, you have Abraham as your father. For out of these very stones, God is able to raise up children to Abraham. Instead, bear fruit in keeping with repentance. Change of heart, change of mind, change of life. Commitment to God has a cost. Purify your heart. It's not what goes into the mouth of man that defiles the man, but what comes out of the mouth from the heart that defiles the man. The inner person needs to be transformed, totally born again. And if that doesn't happen, you're still in the chains of the fallen world that's trapped everyone, and you're still playing by the trickster's logic. You're still playing the game that he set up. And as long as you play the game, he'll be Mr. Timothy Claypole with you. And he'll shake his hat and he'll do a dance and he'll make his little bubbles jingle like a bell. And I'll go, oh, it's Mr. Claypole. It's entertaining, isn't it? Distraction. But ultimately, a sting in the tail comes later. Or when you challenge the system and don't play by the rules of the game, it comes down on you and ultimately destroys you. So everything's nice and bonny as long as you conform. As soon as you break rank and you get any funny ideas, then you become noticeable. You're on the radar of the shape-shifting trickster, Satan, dragon, beast, who use whatever means to shut you up. If he can use craftiness and guile to make you irrelevant and to disempower you and to send you down a false track, he'll have a quiet strategy all the time so you don't notice. Subtle cultural erosion. Draw people into it slowly so they don't notice. Boil the frog slowly. But at the end of the day, that's the strategy. And if it works, he doesn't have to change it. If you try and pull rank, no, you're going to get killed. You're going to get crucified. You're going to get persecuted. It's not this way. You don't go this way. If you go this way, you get persecuted and killed. Take the easy path, the broad path that leads to destruction. Many of those who enter by it. Don't take the narrow path. Don't take up your cross. Who wants to get persecuted? Well, of course, nobody does they?
No, and what you were saying then about all the Jews took it back to because of the lineage. Well, that's the actual true meaning of no respect of persons. God has no respect of that lineage. It doesn't matter that you're blood related to Abraham. And yes, I did love Abraham, but Abraham obeyed me. You're not saved, and you won't be saved just because, somebody, a couple said about us being sons of God. We are sons of God, but we are chastised as sons. If we were bastards, we wouldn't be bothered. He wouldn't bother with us. But we are chastised into doing the right things, not because he wants to punish us, but because the eternal punishment is worse. When we were talking about when Moses came down from the mountain, because he writes on the commandments, you shall have no other God but me, and they go and make a golden calf and start having a sex orgy and dancing around it. So God is going to kill all of them. And Moses intervenes and says, don't kill all of them. And he goes and he says, whoever's with Yahweh, whoever's with God, come with me. And all the Levites go running over. Anybody else, go out the camp. And then they're ordered to go and kill those people. Why? Because these people need to know, because of the hardness of the hearts, they need to see how serious that is. It's not just about punishing. It's about if that and worse will happen for eternity. So this is why it's so important. That's why on the cross, once the cross hit is done, none of that is what it is now, because we've all got the discernment here. But we've still got people who have already sealed that heart off. That heart's already been seared to be stone, and some of the hearts are seared to be with God. This is taking the mark of the beast or taking the seal of God. We always talk about the mark of the beast, but we don't talk about Scripture talking about the seal of God. And I think it's that conversation that we've got to keep running with, Alex.
Have you seen Beatford Cloakington's comment here? Are free men playing the game? It's a very interesting question, right? Because I would say free men are playing the game, yes, by trying to not play the game. Because that's the thing about it.
I think that's a good point, because when I realised how the system was closed and how corrupt it was to keep it that way, I'd gone against the system, using the system for my benefit. But because my benefit would have opened it up to absolutely everybody, that meant that they would lose out. So I was attacked for being in the system and acting in the system, but acting correctly. I was attacked for acting correctly. Once you then become born again, you are seen in a different light, and you get attacked spiritually as well as earthly. That's the difference.
Spot on. All right, Taylor.
Hey, what's up?
Good to see
you,
man.
What's up,
man? What's up, dog?
What have you got for us? He's got to speak quietly, Alex. He might get his Wi-Fi turned off.
Oh, right. He's under threat.
So fucking stupid. Oh, boy. Okay. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and just start with this one. Well, first of all, I just want to say, can you give my new channel a spanner? Because, just like I said in the private chat...
Another channel? You've had another channel taken off?
Yep, another one.
What are you doing on this channel? Are you like doing interviews naked or what?
No, YouTube just has it out for me. I didn't even get a freaking strike. I just got instantly deleted.
I don't know. So what have you got for us? I hope it's in context for our conversations.
Well, what do you mean by in context? Like, what are you specifically referring to?
I don't know, mate. Just show us what you've got.
Okay. Fair enough. Let me go ahead and present this. And yeah, here we go. Oh, yes. White Hat War on Israel is not a secret anymore, or it's rather now it's not an open secret anymore. It's more out in the open now. So I'm going to go ahead and just read this because we got quite a bit to get through. From left to right, from the blog.
Well, hang on before you start, because it is 9:20. Let's condense it a bit. So read some, but summarize it as well.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll just read a little bit. Yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to read the whole thing. From left to right, from the blogosphere to the quote unquote mainstream media, and even amongst American Jews and some evangelical Christians now, it has become socially permissible, even fashionable, to trash the shitty little state, SLS, that's Israel, and its boss, the White Hat operative posing as the late Bibi Satan Yahoo. It's highly believed in the Anon community that he's been swapped out, and there's a lot of evidence for that, but that's neither here nor there. News of a final rupture between Commander Trump and Satan Yahoo has even gone mainstream in the Israeli media, as rumors of Trump's support for Palestinian sovereignty are, by design, beginning to circulate. There was a time not so long ago where even the slightest whisper of the assertion that SLS involves the USA in wars for its selfish interests would suffice to utterly ruin someone's political or journalistic career. And here's just a few examples of people who have had their careers ruined just by even saying something even slightly derogatory or negative about Israel, or rather, I should say, truthful. Journalists Pat Buchanan, journalist Helen Thomas, Congressman James Traficant, Congressman Cynthia McKinney, Senator Charles Percy, Congressman Paul Finley, Congressman Dennis Koenig, et al. There's a whole countless list of this. Not anymore. What was unthinkable during the age of Zionist power is now the new normal. And then we have this new article by Thomas Friedman, who's basically kind of like he's kind of like, how should I put this? He's like the Dan Rather of the New York Times. And then you got Paul Krugman, who's kind of like the Walter Cronkite almost of the New York Times in a way. They're like the two big guys in the editorial section of the newspaper that people look to as like, oh, these are the ones that we should be listening to and, voicing our faith in. All that being understood, Thomas Friedman, or is it Friedman's, could he have been swapped out, who knows? The recent column in the paper of record takes BB bashing to a whole new level of acceptance. You see in the slime stable of sedacious scribblers, the oh-so-esteemed Friedman, a 3-time Pulitzer Prize winner and PBS gadfly, ranks right up there with Paul Krugman as thought-shaping guru to the elite of the American left. And the fact that he is Jewish serves to further legitimize attacks on the SLS. With big-name Jews such as Jeffrey Sachs of Harvard and Friedman of the Slimes leading the charge, the Zionist remnant and their favorite catchphrase smear of anti-Semitism have been rendered powerless. Well played, White Hats. Well played. Saving Israel for last, indeed. And here's just a couple of headlines and from this is one's from the Jewish Forward in Israel. Cutting off communications. Did Trump really just turn his back on Israel? Then Yahoo privately voicing frustration with Trump's Mideast policies report. This is not a spontaneous sudden development. Trump and the corporation were playing the shitty little state all along.
Taylor?
Yes?
Just let me interject there. That's what I was asking you about. The policies that he's now implementing in the Middle East by taking away the sanctions against Syria so that Syria can be great again. So what is that meaning when is it looking like he is turning on Israel?
Well,
because they have him on a coin, mate. They have him. They raise him. So is it all pretense or is it all part of a bigger plan?
Well, here's the thing. Let me correct you what you said there. Trump has never been on the side of Israel, as I've mentioned many times before. He's always been playing them by playing the pro-Zionist card in order to not only to win over the evangelical Christians in this country, over 30 million of them, most of which are Republican voters. So if you alienate them, not only are you turning a huge portion of the public against you, but your own voter base as well. But also because, as Q stated many times, well, for one, we are saving Israel for last. Very specific reason not mentioned a single time. And there's another great quote too. When do you go after the king? Do you go after him first? Or do you take, in chess, I mean, do you go after, no, you take his pawns first, then his rooks, then his knights, and then eventually the queen, and then you eventually get to the king. Israel has always been basically the king of the globalist Zionist mafia and the people controlling it. So in order to attack that, you had to get things prepared first. And that's why Trump was always playing that so-called pro-Zionist card. Freaking, they loved him so much in Israel because of all of the pro-rhetoric that he gave in order to pacify them, and the evangelicals and neocons which, by the way, not all of them fell for that trick. Many of them turned against Trump because they saw through him. The classic Godfather 2 scene. Keep your enemies close, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, kind of thing. So essentially, what that basically means is that now it's becoming public because Israel's been neutered, and we no longer have to play the game anymore. And so now we have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who we know has always been a part of the operation, has come out and brought up Israel's wars. Very interestingly enough, I'll even read the quote. I don't think we should be fighting wars on behalf of Israel, and many Americans agree with that. And here's another one. Ambassador to Israel and evangelical Mike Huckabee. U.S. doesn't need Israel's permission to make deals. This was unthinkable in years past, even as recent as 10 years ago, because we know just how much control they had over the U.S. government as well as governments around the world. But that's changed thanks to the Q operation and Trump acting as the tip of the spear. And so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this this bit right here. Since the fall of 2017, the editorial board of the Anti-New York Times has received substantial incoming fire from Black Pill, the Jews chorus cult, for our unwavering insistence that Q/Trump's war on Israel was being waged in secret and by necessity, concealed by meaningless pro-Israel gestures and I love Israel rhetoric. Further made it clear at the very start of the October 2023 fake Wag the Dog war in Gaza that the scripted events and stage scenes were being managed so as to end very badly for the SLS, Israel. Now it becomes apparent. Hate to say, I told you so. Actually, I love saying it. But the RHC/Anti-New York Times really nailed it all along. Some old receipts blow. And here's just a couple of them. Quote, this is from April 14th, 2018. In the final analysis, despite Trump's matching blue-tie chumminess with Bibi Netanyahu, his controversial recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, his frequent verbal thrashing of Iran, his donning of the skull cap at the Wailing Wall, and the appointment of Zio puppet psycho John Bolton as national security advisor, the undeniable fact remains that the long-cherished Greater Israel Project will not be advancing as long as the region, with Trump's apparent blessing, remains under Russian, Iranian, and indirectly Chinese protection. What's the results, boys and girls? Not the head fakes. And then here's one from just a couple years ago, right after the power gliders and all that. Quote, can you see it, boys and girls? Trump out-Jewed the Jew. Not only will this war by design not end well for the already defeated Zionists, but a free, independent, and secure Palestinian state will probably emerge out of it. Stay tuned. So, there you go. And I've been saying this all along, too. For a few years now, as I'm sure that you remember going back in the shows that we've done together, that I've been saying that all along this has all been just a game to weaken not only the globalist power structure but also the Zionist power structure, which as I've also said before, they do play on the same team at times, but they are also their own entities, like mafia crime families. So, you have to play in order to play that game. You have to make sure that you don't tip your hat too soon. And we've always had these little comms going on over the years of Trump basically saying, that Israel is not our ally. There's this one quote. It might be here. No, it's not here. Okay, whatever. This was on, I think it was Twitter or Truth Social, where he said, quote, fuck Netanyahu. And yes, he actually said that. So, there's a whole story there. And we could even do a whole show talking about that. Going over the history of Trump and Israel and showing how he's been, over the years, he's been weakening the country and working for the Middle East and helping them to, not be attacked by warmongering globalists as Zionists anymore. So there's that. As far as Syria goes, I am 99% certain that we will see Assad come back, and that because he's just basically on vacation at the moment. Let's be real here. Once he comes back, it's going to be interesting. I don't know when that will be. I don't have a timetable, but.
Well, I know you said about people being pessimistic, right? Do you not see because you said they all seem to play on the same side at some times, but they're all committing sabotage against each other, but the Israelis don't know, apparently, that Trump is playing both sides here. And Trump was always going to do this and has always been doing this. But do you not see that when Trump's calling for a one world religion to bring all this together, that he's accepting these massive gifts from Saudi Arabia, that he's relaxing this stuff for Syria? Are you just saying that it's just to get to Israel and therefore would he take away all of what's happening in Europe? Is that your angle, Taylor?
Well, first off, there's multiple angles to it. As far as Saudi Arabia, no matter how you may personally feel about the country, and they definitely do have their issues, I won't deny that. At the end of the day, it's better to have a trade partner than completely alienate a foreign country just because we may not like some of the things that they do. Notwithstanding, of course, child trafficking and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that's a whole different animal to tackle, but just as far as quote unquote human rights violations and stuff, that's their prerogative. And they have many natural resources that working alongside them and doing trade with them, just as we could have done with the Soviet Union back in the 50s and 60s, really is not necessarily a bad thing, even if we don't personally like the way they do things. It's kind of like the classic, you do your thing, I do mine, I do mine. It is, but yes, at the end of the day, it's all about it's all about stabilizing and helping to fix the Middle East problem of constant warfare, as well as trying to think of the word of getting rid of these the globalist Zionist influence they've always had over there, because this all stretches back to after World War One, when the Balfour Declaration, they created the state of I think Iraq was created after World War One, if I remember correctly.
What was, sorry?
Iraq was Iraq created after World War One? I'm trying to remember.
I don't know. You mentioned the Balfour Declaration.
Yeah. Balfour Declaration, all that. Came out of World War One.
Yeah, that was to do with Israel.
Yeah. Before that, you had Chaim Weizmann? It was one of these. I forget his name. The one who in 1897 said that we were going to have a state of Israel. I mean, that we were going to have a Jewish state, and it was going to be taken from Palestine and all that. I forget his name. Theodore Herzl.
Mm-hmm.
But that's so. This is a unfortunately this globalist Zionist mafia has had reign over the world for so many decades, even over 100 years now, even in that part of the world, that it's not going to be fixed overnight.
Do you see that the rabbinic Jews, though, and the Zionists can be classed as different sets of people, because Trump's already signed in the Noahide laws, which are rabbinic laws that they want to implement in a one world order. Yet you keep saying that Trump's not going to bring this world order in. Yet he's acting, Taylor, like he is. So you're saying that is an act as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, you have to make sure you can't trust the rhetoric. Ignore the noise and ignore the static and see through the trees. If I'm probably getting the phrase wrong, my apologies. But the point is don't listen to the rhetoric. Look at the actions and look at what they cause and look at where things are going, rather than just trusting a man at his word. Because you can even apply this to globalists. You can even apply this to the cabal people as well. What they say in public, they'll say, "Oh, we're all peaceful. Oh, we love peace. We're not going to war." The classic. There's a good phrase going on in the Anon community.
The Third World War that Albert Pike set out was the Zionists versus the Muslims. That's pretty much what's going on right now. There's war between Zionists and Muslims. If Trump's going to then come in and stop that war and announce peace and safety, or somebody is, we're seeing prophecy being played out. So Trump is not going to be this saviour that you think he is. He's given you a lot of good stuff, Taylor. I can't deny that. He's certainly stopping a lot of corruption. But as I've said before, people are going to be more than willing to give up some things to gain what they've been missing, especially when they're being put through pain and torture. I still have to look at a bigger picture here. And if Trump is on these coins that the rabbinic Jews are doing, not the Zionists, the rabbinic Jews, the third temple that they're talking about, the red heifers, all this, it's like if they turn on Israel, that means we're already right down this path. They're already talking about a one world religion. They're already talking about that one world religion and these rabbinic Noahide laws that will be applied to what they want to govern worldwide. I'm not sure how that breaks down at the minute because we've got a lot of different things going on. But that I thought it was quite poignant that Trump has done that big deal with Saudi Arabia for a big aeroplane, very nice aeroplane, by the way. But he's doing all these good relations with Saudi Arabia.
I'm going to be honest. I have not seen the plane. I have not seen it.
It's like a flying mansion, mate. And it's, you know, Kenneth Copeland's plane's nowhere near as good as this one, pal. But then he relaxes and takes away all the sanctions on Syria. Now, is that because Assad is not there? Because, I mean, the Syrians themselves, from what I can work out, has turned on Assad because he fled. But I don't know if that was all part of the plan as well. Because we funded, the West has funded, trained and armed those fighters that was ISIS in the Golan Heights that have, you know, systemically moved their way into Syria and then took over cities. You know, Damascus is still there as yet, but are we going to see different things happen? Is Israel going to step up? They've started a ground assault today in Gaza. So is the international community going to come back down? We can see all these flashbangs going off. And that's why I think I'm only speaking for myself. I can't speak for Alex, but that's why I can't put myself in a position where Trump is this do-gooder. He's doing some good things, but people will do good things to get what they want further down the line. What's your take on that, Al?
I'm not bothered, really. Like I said, I don't care. Because it'll just pan out.
For the sake of the show and the people watching.
No, I have to be honest about it. It's like it's all a charade, and whatever Trump's up to or isn't up to in the big scheme of things, or Farage or whatever. It was interesting. Like I think I was saying, like Rupert Law was calling out Farage, and it's anyone who's in some sort of spotlight. The more profile their role is, the more they've got people trying to take a piece of the action, trying to have an investment in the game. And there's so many of those influences that has to be managed by that person. It's a miracle that any politician in any position is able to do anything because the media wants a piece of them. And you've got it, you know, like that whole debate about fake news in 2016, you know, first it was tried to be played on Trump and then Trump played it back on them. So someone's blagging, and the stakes are high around narrative. So you just got these people constantly wrangling with all this complexity. And how can anybody on the outside really know what's going on behind the scenes? So all you can do is just be as canny as possible with the information that you do have, and don't just be going off on all these trails. Someone's going to be the beast. Someone is.
Someone will have to be. Someone will have to be. Now, we can't say that that's Trump, Taylor, but something behind what Trump is doing is moving things. We were talking about chessboards. Zbigniew Brzezinski's chessboard. These chess pieces are moving, and it's a very poignant place that they're moving into. So who's he going for here at the minute? Is he going for the rooks? Is he going for the knights? Has he got the queen in his sights with a step towards the king? You know, these are all very interesting things that we've got to keep an open mind about. But I do get why you would think that this is, you know, the golden age, because that's what they believe they're bringing in. For people like me and Alex, I don't think that's the golden age we're looking for. They're trying to go back to a golden age that we've had erased from history. You know, we look at the Tartarian stuff, all the architecture, the technology that we've had. We're looking at more than likely pre-flood technology, and when we've come into the world, all this stuff was already still there, and we found it. So that's why countries were founded. The stuff that was there that people knew but didn't understand the technology because it had been wiped out, and then it wasn't taught to us because they don't have that influence on us anymore. So the people who kept these all these papers and everything, like the Crusaders, when they found the stuff in the tunnels under Jerusalem, in Solomon's, and all this stuff, they're putting it all together, and the back engineering all this, and they're doing it because they're tapping into spirit. You know, we hear about it all the time, about people channeling, about the CIA doing stuff like this. All these experiments that they've done were meant to just make believe that it's either just entertainment or theatre or films, but these people have had real looks into it. I mean, Aleister Crowley, he was doing the most evil sex magic because it would produce something in this world. They understood the nature of the energies from the spirit to this world. So because they understand it and they only tell us what they want us to know, that was their plan. But now they've had to change the plan because by bringing all this information technology in, everybody can get access to it. So they've got to distract. It was the same with the Enlightenment and the Renaissance, with Martin Luther nailing the protocols to the Catholic Church door because people are reading the Bible in their own language and the Catholics weren't preaching what was in the Bible. So they couldn't force people to force feed it to people anymore. So they had to confuse it by making different arguments up. And that's why we've got all these splinter religions now, and we've got all these different points of view. It's certainly not black and white anymore.
Well, it's never really been black and white, to be honest. You know, life's a multicolored thing. No matter what field you look into, it's always been like that. So I'm gonna go over the next article here. Oh my god, here we go. Oh man, this is a good one right here. Please, Mr. President, too much winning. Here's a couple here's several headlines. Trump told us before he got in that we were eventually going to be winning so much that people would be asking him, "Yo, Mr. President, can we please stop winning? There's too much winning." Here we go. White South Africans granted refuge status by Trump. What do we know? That's one headline, and I'm sure you know about the whole white African situation. I do recall that Jason had multiple people on his show that talked about that whole story.
Yeah, that's still ongoing.
Yes, that's the whole thing. Trump plan would tie some drug prices to what peer nations pay, basically lowering the price of drug prices by a huge amount, which, you know, that's the first step against the big pharma corporations. Tariffs drive Honda to move SUV production from Canada to U.S. Another great thing about the tariffs, moving industry back into the U.S. Hamas frees Americans held in Gaza in deal that largely circumvents Israel. We somewhat went over this one. Once in sync, Trump and Netanyahu now show signs of division. We went over this. Trump wants Saudi Arabia to invest its money in the U.S., all of it.
No, there you go. There you go. That's where the airplane comes in. Is that a bribe? Is that a bribe, or is it partnership?
Well, it's partnerships. Trump made partnership back with the Saudis back in 2017 when bin Salim, whatever his name is, the crown prince, became the head, king of Saudi Arabia after the raids. Where you remember when Trump went over there and they did the sword dance and all that. That's around that time, yeah. that's when they were exposing the Saudis' big role in the child sex trafficking scandals that were going on. That's where a lot of that was being held over the years. Saudis, Saudis invest big in U.S. weapons. AI as Trump basks in welcome. That's more money coming over here, as you've mentioned. Pope Leo, I don't even know what number that is. I'm not going to lie. Calls for news media to shun divisive language. So now we have the new Pope coming out and saying that we need to get rid of this DEI nonsense. Stocks rally as U.S. and China pull back on tariffs. So this comes back to the partnership that we've always had between the U.S. and China, going back since Xi Jinping and Putin have always been has always been working with Trump to defeat the New World Order. Q said it himself back in 2017. Trump administration highlights Trump calls for 20,000 new officers to help with deportations. Of course, we all know about the migrants stuff, especially with that MS-13 member that was a couple weeks ago. That's largely gone over now. Forbes, Trump approval rating tracker, post-tariff dive tapers. Now, the boxing rope-a-dope was coined by the late great boxing poet Muhammad Ali in advance of his outdoor Rumble in the Jungle match against the younger and much stronger George Foreman on a hot summer 1974 night in Africa. The strategy involved Ali covering his face and bobbing while leaning against the ring ropes, inducing his mighty adversary to throwing numerous body punches until tiring out. At the right moment, the seemingly inept boxer on the ropes then opens up with a barrage of counterpunches against the tired-out Foreman, knocking him out. Next to Ali himself, no one executes this strategy better than chess master Trump. After deliberately rope-a-doping his way through a seemingly awkward first 100 days, seemingly being the key word here, Commander Trump's expected winning is now taking shape in the public eye. On tariffs, on trade negotiations, on prescription drugs, on incoming investment and plant relocations, on Gaza, on white South African immigration to the U.S., on the new Latin-singing Republican Pope from Chicago, on deportations, and even the recovering stock market, the expected comeback has begun. And with it, the tiring and now leaderless libtard opposition will be knocked out once and for all. All of this set against a new cultural norm in which it is now socially permissible to bash the SLS and its nefarious past influence over U.S. Middle East policy. Can you guys sense what's coming? And then here's even a picture of Trump next to Muhammad Ali.
Well, see, this is the point. So there's people in the chat mentioned who he's been pictured with through the years, Epstein, all these people. He mixes with a lot, and you're asking people to put faith in him that he's doing it all for a good reason. And all men are liars, Sailor, so you've got to, and in my opinion anyway, you've got to be a little bit sceptical about all this. But we're coming up for the last 10 minutes, Taylor. Can you sum this up then, what you're trying to say?
Okay, well, first let me give this quote by Sun Tzu. Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak. It's a very good quote. So, yeah, we're heading towards, now that we've gotten so far in, hopefully the operation doesn't treat the public like little children and tries to hide them from the truths about, the storm, the child sex trafficking, the COVID con, the election steal of 2020, 9/11, Kennedy assassination, etc., etc., etc. We're heading towards that era, but it's one step at a time. Timetables cannot be given.
No, indeed. Well, it's certainly getting. Well, we say that it's getting interesting every week, but it's certainly warmed up a little bit this week. We've got chemtrails being blatantly put all over the news here now. The sprayed like mad again all last week. There's a layer of dust all over the cars that have, obviously is probably coming from the Sahara and the weather pattern. All this kind of stuff that's going on, and I have to agree with Alex on this, that it isn't all about what's going on in this world, but there are signs that we can see that is showing what the Bible is prophesying about. It's just going to get more and more interesting. I can only see it going day by day at the minute. Going to be an interesting next 6 months. Thanks for coming on, Taylor. I know you've not got as long as you wanted, but with me and Alex not being on last week, we knew we had to have a bit of a chat about things.
That's understandable. It is your show at the end of the day, so.
Oh, thanks.
You do what you think is best.
We just do what we do. We just start talking and see where it goes, as we do every week. We don't have a set fixed schedule. Like I said, I do keep my eye on what's going on in the world because I do want to watch. I want to see what's going on, but it's also been very personal for particularly me over the past 20 years. But even in the last 2 weeks, it's been personal to purge myself of some things. And it doesn't always mean sorting out your gas, water and electric. Those are things that have to be dealt with. But there's other people taking up that. Richard, the beer guy, he's been on a couple of decent shows in the past couple of weeks, pouring out what he's doing there, and he's getting positive results. We've just got to keep going and see what can be done with them. At some point, those will have to be put into a courtroom if we're going to change things. If
well,
not,
that's good job, beer guy.
If not, it's just going to be kept as in the private. So, but we'll see what we're doing. Thanks again, Taylor. I'll send you some homework, and I'll send you the stream link for next week, pal.
Okay, and did you see what I put in the private chat?
Maybe not tonight, mate. Maybe not tonight. Maybe speak to you through the week. I've had a lot go on today, Taylor, so we're not going to be staying on late. All right, mate.
Okay, understandable. All right.
No worries, pal.
Yep. All right, I'll see you later.
Thanks, Taylor. God bless, man.
Yep, God bless, man.
Summer's up, Alex.
Say again?
Summer's up. Sum the spirit world up.
Yeah. Well, for me, we've talked about it in dispatches in the past, but this command takes place in Revelation 18. Come out of her, my people. And obviously that's associated with Babylon, but Babylon doesn't just have one meaning. And so I think it can have several layered meanings. But I do believe, like this book that I've been writing has got strong overtones of simulation. So I do think, yeah, there you go. The heart of flesh typology. Joy and the eschaton in the age of inversion. Yeah, still working on that. Added some more material in and more or less ready to get it out there. But yeah, it's I think that a lot of it is it's this construct. I do believe that we've been moved to a holodeck and everything's distraction and trickster method to get us going down rabbit holes. And yeah, I mean, Babylon's got connections to the banking system, trade. It's this harlot sat on the back of the beast. So it's clearly been riding this beast. They've been strongly connected. The beast eventually turns on the harlot, which fulfills what Jesus said about a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. It brings about its own judgment. But there's a number of ways in which, not just one way, there's not just one fulfillment. Like if you look at what Keir Starmer's doing with the British Empire and, handing back the Chagos Islands and everything else. And I think it was a historian, David Starkey, I saw recently, saying that he's a totally new phenomenon as a prime minister in this country, in that he has absolutely no allegiance whatsoever to this country.
None whatsoever. None whatsoever.
And that's really obvious in all his policies. And so this is why they're driving a bus for us all with migration and everything. They're totally dismantling. But you could argue that there was an imperialism riding on the back of the United Kingdom, and that Starmer hates that and his cronies, and they're destroying that so-called harlot. Now, British imperialism was a harlot. It was a beast. So it's like the thing that's been riding on the back of the other thing, the ideology that was dominant, has been riding this beast, is now hated by this new face of the beast. So it turns on itself or destroys a part of itself. That seems to be what's going on right across the world now. This implosion. And nobody really knows where anybody really stands. It's all a big foggy cloud, and everyone's struggling to find discernment. So for me, is when Jesus said watch and pray, and he talked about the end times, and he talked about the wise and foolish virgins with oil in the lamp, be ready. I think we've got to be very careful not to get led astray, because obviously this idea about Satan's there waiting to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So there's obviously a lot of smoke and mirrors going on, a lot of deception, a lot of layers. And I think we all need a great deal of discipline to keep our powder dry and watch carefully. And it is going to unfold. But for me, it's not just about watching it as passive spectators. It's about how we're going to get involved. And I don't just mean politically. You may need to take up the cudgel. You may have to play a part in resisting the system just to survive. So,
indeed,
partially that, but partially how are you going to demonstrate the love of Jesus Christ? Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Where he said at the end that the lawlessness was going to dampen people's love down because they've got too many things they've got to deal with, and that faith is not going to be present on the earth. There's a remnant. There's always a remnant of God's people, a remnant. And it's always quite small. And we read of 144,000 in Revelation. That's quite small. There's 8 billion people on the face of the earth.
Well,
So
that's
a small remnant.
That is quite interesting, though, because the remnant of God's people, is he speaking of the group of people, the Israelites, that he chose? As they're going to be, because he's going to go back for them. That's the remnant. We've got
Several remnants.
Hey?
Several remnants. They're a remnant. We're a remnant.
Yes, so we've
remnant pockets everywhere.
Remnants of Judah and we've remnants of Israel. That's where this is going. And I think
remnants of Christians. I mean, this is the shocking thing.
Well,
that's even more shocking.
But that's the point. The Christian, if you're a Christian, not a Catholic, if you're a Christian, you are Israel. Jew and Gentile are Israel. Yeah. But you've also got Judah, that tribe, those tribes of the chosen ones, those ones that should have been the beacons of the light, and before they had to be, they've been spread all over the world. And it's that remnant that's been able to preserve that word, that Bible, that being translated. God kept all his promises. It's just whether you can let go of what you believe you know from this world and give it over to something new and untested and untried. When I did, it changed me. And that's all. I can't, you can't go anywhere with that. If that changed, whatever changes you for the better, even though it brings you sorrow because you get understanding, with understanding and knowledge comes a lot of sorrow. I've heard testimonies from people who have become born again and tried to speak to the family, and they've virtually decided that they wanted to end their life or prepared themselves to die and with nobody around them because they're a nutter, because they're saying, don't take these jabs, don't do this, and God's the only way. You're talking to people who are completely looking in the opposite direction, and it's not for you, that you can't grab hold of these people and turn them round and point. You've just got to speak to people. And I think that's what you were touching on when we met the other day, where it's not about it's about witnessing to people, but it's not about just about running out on the street and shouting at everybody or battering people online and shouting at everybody. It's about being that quiet voice shouting in the wilderness. Who's going to listen? Who's going to hear it? Because that's where we were all pushed. We were all pushed into the wilderness by this world. As soon as you say Jesus is Lord, you are pushed away from society. Now, if you want to still celebrate Christmas and Easter and that's your way of coming back in, and you'll be welcome back in. If you don't just follow what Jesus said, then which is it's against the world. The spirit in me doesn't want to do what I used to want to do, Alex, in this world.
Yeah.
And if that spirit isn't there, then you are going to have a foot in this world and a foot in the other world, and you might as well not be in either, because it's just what the scriptures say, and it's the only truth that I've found. So I think we've just got to keep doing what we're doing, Alex. Keep speaking to people as we do. I managed to witness to people this week. I've had some great messages through from people who missed the show last week, because some people actually just look forward to watching it. They can't always see it live, but they prepare it. They put it in to part of their week to be able to get to watch it, even if they have to watch it in more than one session. So what we talk about is at least interesting to some people, and maybe it's interesting to the right people, and they might just open that door and look, and they come and answer.
Two blokes having a conversation.
That's how it starts, mate. That's how it starts. Two blokes walk into a bar, and then it happened.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Alex.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
All right, brother. I'll speak to you in a minute.
I'll see you in a minute.
Thanks for everything, guys. Everybody in the chat. Another great conversation. Thanks for all your input and the conversations going on in the chat. Thanks to everybody who'll watch this after the show. And please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. God bless, guys.